I woke up because something was breathing inside my tent, and it wasn't me. At first, I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just lay there in the pitch-black stillness, listening to the slow, heavy exhale of something that sounded too large, too close, and definitely not human. The nylon walls of the tent pressed inward with each breath, as if whatever was out there, or in there, was pushing gently against the fabric. For a few seconds, I convinced myself I was dreaming. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe I'd rolled over on my sleeping bag. Maybe it was anything except what it sounded like, a living thing inches from my face. Then the breathing stopped. And the silence that followed didn't feel like normal silence. It felt aware, focused, listening. I could hear the blood rushing through my ears. My pulse hammered against the ground. I tried to swallow, but even that tiny motion felt too loud, too obvious. My brain was screaming at me to unzip the tent and run, but my body refused to move, paralyzed by a fear so sharp it made my skin feel too tight. Then, directly beside my head, something dragged its fingers across the tent wall. Slowly, deliberately, from top to bottom, like it was tracing the shape of my skull through the fabric. My breath caught. My eyes watered. I felt an electric bolt of terror shoot down my spine, locking every muscle in place. I couldn't look. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even reach for the knife I kept under my pillow. The creature, or whatever it was, did it again. A second, slower drag, ending right where my neck lay against the sleeping mat. I didn't know whether to pretend I was dead or bolt upright and fight. Both choices felt equally suicidal. And then something happened that made every encounter that followed feel even worse. The zipper on my tent moved. Just an inch. Just enough to make a sound. A soft metallic click click click. Like fingers, actual fingers, were testing it. My eyes flew open in the darkness, even though I couldn't see a thing. The cold night air felt suddenly too warm, too thick. The tent shook slightly, as if something brushed against it, or leaned into it. Then I heard a voice. Not loud. Not whispered. Just placed. Right outside the thin fabric. A voice that sounded almost human. Almost, but carried something broken in it, like a person imitating speech without knowing what the words meant. It said my name. Not shouted. Not questioned. Just spoken, calm and clear, from a mouth I couldn't see. That's when I knew two things instantly. 1. Whatever was outside my tent already knew who I was. 2. It hadn't stumbled onto my campsite by accident. The zipper twitched again. Once. Twice. A slow pull downward, like the thing was waiting to see if I'd react. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to pass out. But all I could do was lie there, and pray that the thin line of nylon between me and it would somehow hold. Then, just before the zipper reached the halfway point, the creature suddenly stopped, as if it sensed something. As if something else had just entered the woods. And without another breath, without another sound, it slipped away from my tent with impossible quietness, leaving only the smell of damp earth and something metallic in the air. I didn't know it then, but that night was only the first of 3 encounters, each one worse, each one more impossible, each one proving I should have never camped in those woods after dark. My name is Aaron, and for most of my life, camping had been my escape, my reset button when the noise of work, bills, and people got too loud. I grew up in Oregon, surrounded by forests that stretched farther than the horizon. And my dad used to tell me that the woods were the only place a person could hear their own thoughts clearly. Maybe that was why, even as an adult, I still sought out the quiet whenever the world felt overwhelming. That weekend was supposed to be one of those rare breaks. No deadlines. No crowds. No responsibilities. Just me, my gear, and the steady calm of the Pacific Northwest wilderness. I had driven out early Friday morning, long before sunrise, with a thermos of coffee in the passenger seat, and the kind of light fog that made everything feel slow and peaceful. The sun hadn't fully broken through the trees yet, so the forest looked soft, almost sleepy. As I pulled off the Forest Service road, and parked beside a small clearing I'd camped in many times before. It was the perfect spot. Far from the main trails. Hidden from the wind. A stream nearby for fresh water. And most importantly, quiet. Not silent in a creepy way, silent in a comforting way. Birds calling. Leaves rustling. Water trickling. The kind of silence that made you feel like the world was finally taking a breath with you. I spent the morning setting up camp, pitching my tent under a cluster of tall pines, hanging my food bag high between two trees, gathering a modest bundle of firewood. Everything felt routine, almost meditative. The soft crunch of pine needles under my boots, the smell of sap, the distant wingbeat of a hawk overhead. All of it was familiar. Safe. By midday, I had already fallen into the rhythm I loved. Cook a small lunch. Read a few chapters of the book I brought. Walk the perimeter of the clearing. Listen to the steady hum of nature. Not once did anything feel off. Not a strange noise. Not a weird movement. Not a single sign of anything unusual. It was the kind of peace you miss without realizing it. Around 4 p.m., the sunlight filtering through the trees turned golden, warming the ground in a soft glow. I sat beside the fire ring, slowly boiling water for dinner, watching small sparks rise into the air like glowing fireflies. A gentle breeze drifted through the branches, carrying the scent of cedar and moss. The forest looked alive but calm, like an old friend settling into a chair beside you. I wasn't thinking about danger. I wasn't thinking about fear. My mind was on simple things. What trail I'd hike in the morning. Whether I'd hear owls at night. How cold it would get after sunset. Even when I wandered a little deeper into the woods to collect more firewood, the only thing I felt was gratitude. The kind of gratitude that wraps around you like a warm blanket, reminding you that the world is bigger than your worries. When night finally arrived, it was peaceful in the way only forests can be. My campfire burned low, crackling softly. My tent glowed warm from the small lantern inside. I ate dinner while listening to the distant hoot of an owl and the gentle flow of the creek. Nothing about the night suggested danger. Nothing hinted at fear. Nothing whispered that something was watching me from the trees. I crawled into my tent feeling rested, comfortable, and completely at ease. And the worst part? That calm, that absolute sense of safety, is exactly why what happened next hit so hard. I don't know when the shift started, if it was a sound, a feeling, or just something deep in my instincts, but somewhere between getting the fire steady and finishing the last bite of my dinner, the woods around me changed. Not dramatically. Not in a way I could point at. It was subtle, like a breath being held. At first, it was just the quiet. The wrong kind of quiet. Not peaceful, not calming. This was the kind of silence where the world feels like it's listening. I remember sitting there, poking at the fire with a stick, when I noticed it. The crickets gone. The wind gone. Even the distant rustle of animals moving through the brush had stopped. It was so sudden and so complete that I froze. I tried to laugh it off, to tell myself I was imagining things, but even my heartbeat sounded too loud in my chest. Something felt off. Not dangerous. Not yet. Just wrong. I tried to continue what I was doing. I cleaned up my small camp area. I put away my gear. I checked my tent. Normal things. Routine things. But with every small task, my uneasiness grew a little more. My peripheral vision kept catching movement between the trees. Even though whenever I looked directly, there was nothing. The tree-line looked the same. Yet I couldn't shake the sense that something was standing just beyond it, hidden by the shadows. Then came the first sound. A soft, quick snap of a twig. Too deliberate to be the wind. Too light to be a big animal. Too close. I turned immediately, flashlight in hand, pointing it toward the trees behind my tent. The beam cut into the darkness, slicing through branches and bushes, but nothing moved. Nothing looked disturbed. If anything, it felt like the forest was deliberately holding still, waiting for me to lower the light. I tried brushing it off as a small animal. Squirrel. Rabbit. Something harmless. But deep down I didn't believe that. As I sat back down, letting the fire warm my legs, that feeling of being watched intensified. Not like someone was casually observing me, more like something was studying me, learning me, waiting for me to make a mistake. Every time I shifted or turned my head, the feeling seemed to jump, like whatever was out there adjusted its position too. Then the temperature dropped. Not a gentle evening chill. It was like the air itself thinned. My breath began to fog, even though it hadn't been that cold moments earlier. I zipped my hoodie up, but it didn't help much. The cold felt internal, like it was seeping into my bones. I checked the time. Just after 10:30 p.m. Still early enough for wildlife to be active. But the forest remained unnaturally still. Another sound. This time, a slow dragging over dry leaves. Not footsteps. Something heavier, sliding. And the beam touched the trees. Then, after a few breaths of total silence, another noise came from behind me, on the opposite side of camp. A faint whisper of movement. Then nothing. It was circling me. Or at least, that's what it felt like. I tried speaking out loud, just to break the suffocating quiet. Hello? Anyone out there? My voice sounded small, swallowed almost instantly by the trees. No answer. The silence pressed back, heavier than before. My nerves began to pulse with a slow-building dread. I could feel it behind me. I could feel it in front of me. Everywhere except where my flashlight pointed. And that's when my fire, my one source of comfort, flickered unnaturally hard, as if someone had blown directly across it. But there was no wind. That was the moment I knew something was getting closer, and it wanted me to know it was there. The moment the fire jerked sideways, everything inside me snapped into alertness. It wasn't just fear now. It was instinct, primal and undeniable, telling me that whatever was out there wasn't curious anymore. It was closing in. I stood up slowly, trying not to make sudden movements, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The air felt heavier, thicker, like I had suddenly climbed to a higher altitude. Every breath was harder to pull in. My chest tightened as if the forest itself was pressing inward. Then the sound came again. Crunch. Slow. Deliberate. Close. Not the scurry of an animal. Not the shuffle of a deer. This was gait, rhythmic, intentional steps. Something walking upright. I raised my flashlight toward the tree line in front of me. The beam shook, slicing through the darkness. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Just trees and shadows. And then, a shape moved. Not fully visible, not enough to understand, but enough to recognize it wasn't human. It stood between two thick pines, tall and thin, its outline sharp against the deeper darkness behind it. I could see the long, unnatural arms hanging low. Too low. Almost to its knees. It didn't step forward. It didn't flinch. It just watched me. A coldness crawled up my spine so fast I couldn't breathe. I tried to speak, but the words stuck. My mouth opened, but nothing came out but air. My brain scrambled for explanations. Camper, ranger, lost hiker. But my instincts rejected each one violently. Whatever that thing was, it didn't belong in these woods. Then its head tilted. Not like a curious person would tilt their head. No, it jerked in one sharp, snapping motion, like a glitch in reality. My flashlight flickered. The air became even heavier, pushing on my ribs. I stumbled backward, unable to tear my eyes away. And then it stepped out. Slowly, one foot sliding forward before lifting. Its leg bent at an unnatural angle, like a joint was missing. It was tall, far taller than me. 8 feet, maybe more. Its skin looked pale, almost reflective under the flashlight. But the worst part was its face. Or what should have been a face. There were no eyes. Just smooth, stretched skin, like clay that hadn't been finished. Yet somehow, I could feel it staring directly into me. I took another step backward, breathing hard now, adrenaline flooding every muscle. My hand brushed against my backpack, and I nearly tripped. The creature paused as if listening to my fear. Then for the first time, it made a sound. A low, vibrating rumble that shook the ground more than the air. Not a growl. Not a hiss. Something deeper. Something that felt like it was inside my bones rather than my ears. My knees almost buckled. I wasn't imagining things. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't my mind playing tricks. This thing was real. And it was getting closer. It took another step forward, faster this time. My flashlight beam trembled wildly across its torso. It didn't blink. Didn't hesitate. It just kept coming, its long arms swinging with unnatural fluidity. The heaviness in the air turned suffocating. Like breathing underwater. Like every inhale was a mistake. My heart pounded so violently I genuinely thought I might pass out. I grabbed my backpack, not even knowing why, maybe instinct, maybe desperation, and stepped backward until the back of my knees hit a fallen log. The creature stopped just outside the reach of the firelight. almost like it was waiting for the flames to die down. That's when I realized the horrible truth. It wasn't approaching the fire. It was avoiding it. And the moment the fire dimmed even slightly, the creature took another step forward, inching closer, ready to close the distance. The horror wasn't hiding anymore. It was here. And it knew exactly where I was. The moment the fire popped and collapsed inward, sending a burst of sparks into the air, the creature lunged. Not walked. Not stepped. Lunged. Its entire body snapped forward in a horrifying blur, like it had been holding itself back this whole time, waiting for the flame to weaken just enough. I didn't think. I didn't plan. Instinct detonated in my chest, and I spun around, sprinting blindly into the trees. Branches whipped my arms. Cold air burned my throat. Leaves kicked up behind me as I pushed my legs harder than they had ever moved. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see how close it was, because I could hear it. That sound. A fast, crawling scrape mixed with pounding steps, like bone and flesh hitting the forest floor at the same time. Too many limbs. Too fast. Too close. My heart hammered so violently I thought it would shatter inside my ribs. I ducked under a low branch just as something massive swiped behind me. I heard it tear bark clean off the tree instead of taking my head. The sharp crack of splintering wood exploded behind me. I stumbled downhill, lost balance and rolled. Dirt filled my mouth. Rocks dug into my back. But I scrambled up instantly, legs shaking, lungs screaming. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. A flash of pale skin appeared to my left. It was beside me, matching my speed, studying me. I veered right, leaping over a log, crashing through brush. My backpack bounced painfully against my spine, but I refused to slow down. Every tree looked the same. Every path looked wrong. Panic blurred everything into a spinning nightmare of shadows and sound. Then, a roar. Low, guttural, vibrating the ground beneath my feet. My ears rang from it. I clamped my hands over them mid-run, and nearly fell again. The creature wasn't just chasing me, it was hunting me, driving me, forcing me deeper into the forest. I spotted a cluster of boulders ahead, forming a narrow gap at the bottom. Without thinking, I dove toward it, sliding on my side and scraping against jagged rock. The gap was barely wide enough for my body, definitely too small for that thing. I pressed myself inside, curled up tight, hands over my mouth to muffle my breathing. The forest went silent. Then, thud. A massive weight slammed against the rocks above me. Dust rained down on my head. The creature's long arm appeared in the opening, groping blindly, its fingers impossibly thin and far too long. They scraped the dirt inches from my face. I pushed myself farther back, chest tight, breath shallow. If it reached even a little farther, it would grab me. I could already imagine those cold fingers closing around my throat. The arm withdrew. Silence. Then, a sound that made my blood freeze. It started tapping on the rocks. Not random. Not frustrated. Slow, rhythmic taps, like it was thinking. Like it was patient. Like it knew I wasn't going anywhere. My lungs burned. My muscles trembled violently. I couldn't stay here. If it found a way to pull the rocks aside, I was dead. I carefully turned my body, inch by inch, until I was facing the other side of the crevice. A tiny opening. Barely enough to crawl through. I didn't hesitate. I dug my fingers into the dirt and dragged myself forward. My clothes tore. My elbows bled. But I kept crawling, kept pushing, kept forcing my body through the suffocating darkness. Behind me, the tapping stopped. Then, a violent slam rocked the entire crevice. Dust exploded around me. The creature was trying to break the rocks. I pushed harder, breath ragged, heart thudding wildly. My fingers touched open air. I shoved myself out, rolling into the leaves on the other side, gasping. Another slam. Another crack. The rocks were loosening. I staggered to my feet and ran again. Faster than before, fueled by raw terror. Every second counted. Every step could be the difference between living and dying. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. All I knew was simple. If I stopped, even for a breath, it would reach me. I don't remember the last part of my run. My legs moved on their own, powered by sheer panic and instinct. Everything was a blur. Branches tearing at my jacket, Cold air slicing my lungs, the forest spinning around me like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But eventually, the ground changed. Leaves became gravel. Gravel became dirt road. Dirt road became something human again. I collapsed onto the path, gasping, shaking so hard my teeth clattered. For the first time in what felt like hours, I didn't hear anything behind me. No scrapping. No tapping. No sound of something hunting me. Just wind. Just silence. Just emptiness. I forced myself to stand, every muscle trembling. I followed the road until it curved and revealed the small campground ranger station. Dark, empty, but familiar enough to feel like salvation. I staggered onto the porch, slammed my body against the door, and rattled the handle until it gave way. Inside, it smelled like old coffee and dust. I didn't care. I locked the door behind me, slid down against it, and sat there in the dim glow of the emergency light, trying to convince my brain I was safe. For a while nothing happened. No footsteps. No growls. No tapping on the glass. Just me sitting in the quiet, trying not to fall apart. It took almost an hour before someone else arrived. Another camper who had woken up early to start a hike. He found me pale, dirt-covered, with blood on my arms and leaves tangled in my hair. I must have looked insane. He kept asking what happened. I kept trying to explain, but the words didn't make sense even to me. Something chased me. Something wasn't human. Something was still out there. The ranger eventually showed up, too, and I told him the same thing. His face tightened when I mentioned the tapping. When I described the pale shape. When I said the rocks had been cracking as the creature tried to reach me. He didn't say I was lying. He didn't say I was imagining things. He just said, "Stay here," and left to check. I waited. And waited. And waited. He came back an hour later with a strange expression. Somewhere between confusion and disbelief. He said he checked the area where I claimed to have been hiding. He said there was no crevice. No trail of blood. No disturbed rocks. Nothing. Not a single sign that anything had ever chased me. I argued with him. Begged him to look again. But he just kept repeating the same phrase. There's nothing out there. Eventually, I got a ride back to the main ranger station. They cleaned my cuts, gave me water, and told me I probably fell, panicked, and got lost. That fear can make the mind create monsters. Maybe they were right. Maybe exhaustion and darkness twisted everything into something impossible. But then, as I was packing up to leave, the ranger who checked the forest approached me again. He looked around first, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. Then quietly he said, "Last night, someone filed a noise complaint. They said they heard tapping. Slow. Repetitive. Coming from the woods." My stomach dropped. He continued, voice even lower. "They thought it was just an animal. But when I checked the logs from past years, other campers have reported the same thing." I stared at him, waiting for him to say he was joking. But he didn't. He just nodded once and walked away. I left the campground shortly after, but the forest followed me. Not physically, but in the way all true terror follows people. In the dreams. In the sounds at night. In the moments when the house is quiet and something taps on the wall, even though I know no one is there. Some nights, I wake up thinking I'm back inside that crevice. Dust falling on my face, rocks shaking above me, something reaching. Other nights, I swear I hear it again. That same slow, patient tapping. As if it finally found the right direction. As if it's getting closer. I keep telling myself it's just in my head. I keep trying to believe it. But last night, when I turned off the lights and the house went quiet, I heard a sound just outside my window, soft, rhythmic, unmistakable. Top, top, top.